Hello, models.com. My name's Kristen McMenamy, and you're here at my house. Well, yeah, my house, but more specifically, my dressing room.
Kristen McMenamy's story is unlike any other in fashion. She wasn't a typical model in the 80s or 90s, yet she became a symbol of the most daring and experimental era. Bold, unpredictable, and unforgettable, she ruled runways, challenged the industry, and then quietly disappeared, leaving fans to wonder about the life behind her striking, unforgettable image. Join us as we explore the heartbreaking journey of Kristen McMenamy and uncover the moments that shaped her extraordinary life, standing out from others.
Donatella! Hip, hip, hooray! So she gave me that.
Kristen McMenamy's journey in fashion began far from the glamorous world she would one day dominate. She grew up in Pennsylvania in a quiet, traditional Catholic family. She was shy, restless, and felt disconnected from anything that resembled high fashion. School wasn't a place she enjoyed, and she never felt like one of the pretty girls. Friends were few, and she often saw herself as plain. Yet even then, she had a spark. She loved dressing in a way that set her apart, hunting through thrift shops to find odd pieces she could mix together into unusual outfits. People often assumed she didn't care how she looked, but the truth was, she cared deeply, just not in the way most people expected. At 18, she stepped into the world of modeling, walking her first runway for Jill Sander in 1985. There were no fireworks, no instant fame. She kept turning up for jobs, but the feedback was always the same. She was too unusual, too sharp, and too severe. Her angular face and piercing stare didn't fit the standard beauty ideals of the late 1980s, when the industry was in love with glossy, glamorous supermodels. She didn't radiate the easygoing, girl-next-door charm or the sultry, intimate appeal that clients were used to booking. This made many hesitate to work with her. Still, not everyone overlooked her. A few photographers noticed something different, an energy that couldn't be neatly labeled. She didn't grab attention for being traditionally beautiful. She stood out because she made people stop and think, sometimes even feel uneasy. And in fashion, that kind of impact could be gold. Yet, for a long time, she didn't feel like she truly belonged. Behind the camera was the only place she felt stunning. In her own eyes, beauty wasn't something she carried naturally. It was something that came alive only under the lens. As a teenager without much money, she had learned to create her own style from secondhand finds, mixing bold, ironic pieces that made people take a second look. Those early choices hinted at the unique fashion voice she would one day be known for, even if the industry wasn't ready to hear it at the time. Back then, fashion was still in love with a certain kind of beauty. The faces that sold the most were soft, warm, and instantly likable, the kind you'd see in glossy department store ads or catalog covers. Kristen didn't fit that picture at all. Her sharp bone structure, piercing gaze, and refusal to soften her look made people see her as difficult to market. She didn't give off easy charm, and because she rarely smiled, some thought she was too severe. Others simply didn't understand her appeal. Deep down, she shared some of those doubts. She didn't feel glamorous or sultry, and the image of what a model was supposed to be didn't seem to match her. The work came in waves, never steady because her face didn't feel like the kind that could sell products to the masses. But she didn't give up. She kept showing up, even when she wasn't sure if she truly belonged. Then, everything changed with one creative partnership, embracing the fashion world.
Bing, bang, bong. Sing, sang, song. Ding, dang, dong.
In the early 1990s, she began working closely with photographer Stephen Meisel, a man with an eye for spotting what others overlooked. He saw more than just an unusual face. He saw someone who could completely transform into whatever the vision demanded. Under his guidance, Kristen took a risk that would completely redefine her career. She bleached her eyebrows and dyed her hair an inky black, stripping away the last traces of conventional prettiness. The effect was startling. Her look shifted from slightly awkward to otherworldly, almost unreal, as if she had stepped out of a dream or a distant planet. The very intensity that had once made clients hesitant suddenly became her greatest strength. Now, she wasn't just a model, she was a canvas for stylists to shape, a muse for designers to experiment with, and a force that photographers could push into bold, uncharted territory. She no longer needed to fit into the box of standard beauty. She became something rare, unforgettable, and entirely her own. That bold change in her appearance gave Kristen a completely different kind of power on the runway and in front of the camera. She was no longer the type of model brought in to sell a shade of lipstick or a bottle of perfume. She had stepped into something bigger. She became a living canvas, a figure that could turn into strange, futuristic, and sometimes unsettling visions of womanhood. The shift worked. She began to appear in darker, more experimental fashion stories, especially in the pages of Vogue Italia, where Stephen Meisel kept inviting her back for years. There was no one else in the business who looked like her, and now she didn't need to look like anyone else. Her unusual presence caught the eyes of fashion's biggest names: Karl Lagerfeld, Vivienne Westwood, and Gianni Versace. She was no longer just filling space in a designer's lineup, she was becoming the centerpiece, the very heart of the creative idea. Her androgynous features, her still unreadable face, and her refusal to smile became part of her signature. People in the industry started calling her the chameleon, not because she simply changed her hair or wardrobe, but because she could completely shift her identity. One shoot might have her dressed like a porcelain-skinned figure from another century, and the next could show her in tight latex, with makeup that looked smudged and wild. She couldn't be pinned down, and that made her irresistible to designers who wanted to go beyond the safe version of beauty. Her presence on the runway became just as unforgettable as her photographs. Kristen developed a walk that felt almost like theater. She didn't just display the clothes, she told a story with them. She might stop in the middle of the runway, twist her body sharply, strike an exaggerated pose, or move in a way that pulled every eye toward her. Nothing about it was delicate or hidden, and that was the entire point. Karl Lagerfeld once described her as someone who carried not just beauty, but spirit and life. And it was that energy that made her stand apart in an era when most models were expected to be soft, pretty, and replaceable. Her collaborations with Vogue Italia became something entirely different from traditional fashion spreads. Stephen Meisel didn't photograph her simply to showcase her face. He used her to tear apart the usual rules of modeling. She didn't just pose, she became the story. In one set of images, she looked like a ghostly aristocrat. In another, she was shrouded in a black veil, wearing gloves that made her seem more like a piece of living sculpture than a person. Her expression could be empty, unsettling, dramatic, or all of them at once. She wasn't the dream girlfriend or the trend-setting it girl. She was the perfect collaborator for artists who wanted someone who could vanish into a role completely. Meisel trusted her completely. He didn't need to direct her every move. He gave her a role and she stepped into it as if it was second nature. The same was true when she walked a runway. She didn't float down it like most models. Sometimes she moved with jerky, puppet-like motions. Other times she glided like a shadow. Editors often struggled to explain exactly what she was doing, but the designers understood it was performance, personality, and art all woven into one. The sudden fall and a louder rise. Gianni Versace placed Kristen at the very heart of his shows and campaigns, not just to display clothes, but to create an atmosphere. Her walk was never predictable, and that unpredictability made her unforgettable. She could shift the entire mood of a runway simply by the way she moved. Behind the scenes, Donatella P. feared a model's personality might steal attention from the clothing. Donatella believed the opposite, that pairing a strong model with a strong collection only made both shine brighter. Kristen carried that boldness into every part of her work. She wasn't afraid of confrontation, even clashing backstage with Linda Evangelista over who first wore the now iconic dark roots with blonde hair. She had no problem standing her ground. She also embraced challenges that other models would have turned down.
I'm Kristen McMenamy, and I'm a model. And I guess you guys are here to see my wardrobe, right?
Whether it was uncomfortable outfits, strange makeup, or garments that felt more like art pieces than fashion, she wore them with absolute commitment.
My Gucci suit, this one's just glorious. I spent a lot of money on this, and I questioned it. It was in my basket for like a month.
Designers like Alexander McQueen and Jean-Paul Gaultier gave her their most daring looks: rubber, duct tape, metal, and she brought them to life without worrying about looking traditionally beautiful. For her, the magic of fashion wasn't about creating desire, it was about transformation and sometimes even distortion. By now, Kristen was at the height of her career. She was in constant demand, changing the way people thought about modeling. She had become the type of figure she once admired from a distance, the kind she used to see in glossy magazines and think of as untouchable. It was strange for her to realize she had become that person. By the late 1990s, Kristen McMenamy had worked with nearly every legendary photographer and designer of her time. She had gone further than most models could ever dream. Not just in fame, but in the way she could completely transform herself into something unforgettable. And then, without any farewell or dramatic send-off, she stepped away from the fashion world, unveiling another part of her that no one knew about. At that point in her life, she had a daughter and moved back to Pennsylvania, choosing to focus on raising her family. She described herself as a single mother, making choices based on a new set of priorities. The change came unexpectedly. She hadn't planned on leaving, but being home with her baby gave her a sense of fresh air and renewed perspective. She admitted she had started feeling bored with modeling, and boredom was dangerous in a career built on energy and passion. Her exit wasn't part of some carefully planned strategy. She simply stopped doing shows, campaigns, and editorials. There was no farewell cover, no public statement, no countdown to a comeback. Her life had moved in another direction, and she didn't try to split her focus between the runway and motherhood. Kristen had always thrown herself fully into her work, disappearing into whatever role she was given. But motherhood demanded that same level of devotion. She chose to give it entirely to her daughter. For the next decade, she was almost completely absent from fashion. There were no "Where is she now" features, no nostalgic returns, no attempts to keep her name alive in the industry. She didn't seem interested in how people interpreted her absence. Meanwhile, the fashion world changed. The early 2000s brought in a sleeker, sexier, and more commercial look. The strange, experimental editorials that had once been her playground faded away, replaced by straightforward campaigns focused on selling products. Kristen didn't chase the new trends or try to adapt to this shift. She didn't hold on to her visibility or create a brand around her past success. She walked away without explanation, without regret, and without looking back. And in many ways, for someone who had built a career on doing things entirely her own way, disappearing quietly was the most fitting move she could have made. More than 10 years after stepping away from fashion, Kristen McMenamy returned, and she didn't slip back quietly. She came back in her 50s, not remade into a softer version of herself, not hiding her age, but walking onto the runway exactly as she was. Her long, natural gray hair framed the same sharp features that once unsettled the industry, and she booked shows that even much younger models would dream of: Marc Jacobs, Valentino, Fendi. These were major, high-pressure moments, but Kristen wasn't there as a nostalgic throwback. She was placed alongside the new generation, not separate from them, and she carried the same fierce energy she had in her prime. Her stare was still piercing, her walk still commanding. This return wasn't just about getting work again, it was about showing up on her own terms. In her early years, much of her image had been shaped by photographers, stylists, and creative directors. Now she had far more control over how the world saw her. Her Instagram became a key part of that, filled with unfiltered self-portraits, odd combinations of clothes, and a mix of messy glamour and grounded humor. She didn't post to look flawless. She didn't try to fit the mold of elegance. Sometimes she leaned into the bizarre, and that made her feel even more authentic. She could be bold and strange one moment, playful the next. In one British Vogue feature, she laughed while showing off a Gucci t-shirt printed with a nude image of herself. She admitted she'd never worn it and probably never would, but she loved how weird and funny it was. That mix of humor, confidence, and unpredictability was exactly what made her magnetic again. She didn't need anyone to style her into relevance. She was making herself relevant. Brands began bringing her back into campaigns not to ignore her age, but to celebrate it. She wasn't hiding the years, she was using them. When a fall became a statement. Of course, not every moment was perfect. In January 2023, she walked in Valentino's spring couture show in Paris. The runway was filled with towering heels and dramatic shapes. During her walk, she stumbled and fell, the kind of moment that cameras and social media never miss. The clip was shared everywhere: news outlets, fashion blogs, countless online feeds. But the worst part wasn't the fall itself. It was the conversation that followed. People's reactions revealed more about the industry and the public than the stumble ever could. When Kristen McMenamy fell on the Valentino runway in early 2023, the moment traveled fast. Videos flooded the internet, but instead of blaming the towering heels, many headlines turned the focus on her age. Strangers online questioned whether she still had a place on a catwalk, as if one stumble erased decades of work. The next day, Kristen spoke up on Instagram. She simply said the truth, that the shoes were to blame. She didn't attack anyone, didn't make a scene, just addressed it plainly. And then she added something that cut deeper. Women her age deserve to be seen. That was never a publicity stunt. It was the heart of why she had come back. She wasn't chasing applause or trying to live off old glory. She returned because she still had something to give, and because her presence, exactly as she is now, matters in an industry still in love with youth. Kristen never built her name on being the typical beauty. She never tried to ooze sex appeal or charm her way into campaigns. Her power came from being different, from refusing to blend in with the other faces. She was sharp, sometimes strange, and completely unapologetic. That's what made her unforgettable. She has never pretended to be without doubts. She's spoken openly about the things she used to dislike about herself and how those feelings never fully disappeared, even when she was one of the most in-demand models in the world. She simply stopped hiding them. She's been open about choosing to age naturally, no facelifts, no nose jobs, not because she thinks those choices are wrong for others, but because erasing the signs of her life never felt true to her. Kristen has said she was awkward growing up, shy, and often teased. She didn't fit in, and she hated that feeling. Yet somehow, fashion, the place most people think demands perfection, became the space where she could be herself. She said the industry is full of people who might feel like outsiders anywhere else, and That's part of what makes it so creative. If there's one lesson she's carried through her life, it's that the very traits that make you feel like you don't belong can become the things that set you apart. She never chased the role of a mentor, but she became one without trying. She didn't inspire people by being flawless. She inspired them by showing up fully herself, insecurities and all. In a world where so many people bend and smooth their edges just to fit in, Kristen stayed exactly as she was. Her career lasted not because she reinvented herself to please others, but because she never let the world take her difference away. Now let's take a step back to the most important part of her career. After the break,
When it goes right, I'm thinking you are the greatest person, the only person in this whole entire room.
in 2014, Kristen McMenamy made her way back to the catwalk, stepping out for Prada. Around that same time, she made a choice that would become one of her trademarks. She stopped coloring her hair and allowed her natural silver strands to shine. Just a year later, Marc Jacobs brought her in for his fall and winter campaign, proving she still had the kind of presence designers wanted. In 2006, her face appeared on the cover of a special book celebrating the history of Vogue magazine, photographed by Stephen Meisel alongside Linda Evangelista. By 2009, she was again making headlines. That summer, she graced the cover of Vogue Italia, and the main story boldly called her a legend. Soon after, Harper's Bazaar featured her in its September issue without a trace of makeup, celebrating raw, natural beauty in a piece called Supermodel's Supernatural. That same season, she became part of Lanvin's fall and winter campaign. The next year, she took on one of the most unusual runway moments of her career. At the Victor and Rolf Fall and Winter 2010 show, she became a living version of a Russian nesting doll with layer upon layer of clothing placed on her right in front of the audience. She also walked in Klein's fall and winter show that year. In August 2010, she returned to the cover of Vogue Italia with a striking 24-page photo story called Water and Oil, inspired by the massive Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Some of the images showed her appearing like a bird drenched in oil, which sparked debate. While the visuals were intense, the magazine's editor explained that the true aim was to remind people to take better care of the natural world. Kristen's choices during this time showed how fearless she was in taking risks, whether it meant showing her age proudly, embracing raw beauty, or becoming the center of a conversation through bold and thought-provoking art. In September 2010, Kristen McMenamy took part in a short fashion film for Gareth Pugh's spring and summer collection, showing once again how fearless she was in bringing dramatic concepts to life. Just days later, she closed the Louis Vuitton spring and summer runway show wearing zebra-striped body paint, turning her own body into part of the art. In January 2011, she walked as the final model in the Chanel Haute Couture spring and summer show, a role that highlighted her commanding presence. That year, she also starred in a short film directed by Karl Lagerfeld called The Tale of a Fairy, further blending the lines between fashion and storytelling. She appeared at the Cannes Film Festival as well, attending a gala for Amphar, showing that her influence stretched beyond runways into the world of high-profile events. Kristen continued to dominate campaigns through the next years. In 2011, she appeared in the fall and winter ad campaigns for both Givenchy and Jean-Paul Gaultier. In 2011, she modeled for Roberto Cavalli's spring and summer campaign, and the following year she walked the Atelier Versace runway for spring and summer. Later in 2013, she became the face of Balenciaga's fall and winter advertising campaign. Years later, in October 2018, she opened the Valentino Spring and Summer 2019 fashion show, a moment that confirmed her lasting relevance in the industry. Her return did not slow down. In 2021, she appeared in Gucci's Aria Fall and Winter campaign, captured by photographers Mert and Marcus. That September, she opened the Fendas show, a high-profile collaboration between Fendi and Versace. Her influence continued into 2022, when she appeared on the cover of British Vogue in January and opened Valentino's spring and summer haute couture show that same month. Even in her return years, Kristen faced the risks of high fashion. In July 2022, while closing the Jean-Paul Gaultier fall and winter haute couture show in a dramatic bridal gown, she tripped on her towering heels and fell on the runway. Audience members rushed to help her, and the incident quickly spread across news outlets and social media. Yet, like everything else in her career, even a stumble became part of her story. A reminder that her power was never in perfection, but in presence, fearlessness, and the ability to make every moment unforgettable. While everyone only sees her abilities, just very few know how she turned into this woman. Keep watching to find out what shaped her. Kristen McMenamy grew up in Easton, Pennsylvania, and also spent some of her childhood in Buffalo, New York. She was the third of 7 children in a close-knit Irish-American Catholic family. From an early age, she showed intelligence and dedication, earning good grades in school, but she often faced teasing from classmates who called her skeleton because of her tall, thin frame. Despite the challenges at school, she carried herself with quiet determination. After finishing high school, Kristen McMenamy left her hometown of Easton and moved to New York City with a dream of becoming a model. At first, the journey was far from easy. She faced rejection after rejection from multiple agencies, but her determination never wavered. Modeling was the only thing she wanted, and she clung to that dream with fierce persistence. Early in her search, she met the famous agent Eileen Ford, who suggested she undergo plastic surgery to succeed. Kristen chose to stay true to herself and refused, proving that she didn't need to change her natural look to make her mark. Soon, a modeling agency signed her and sent her to work in Paris, giving her the first real break in her career. Later, she was represented by Elite Model Management and Ford Models, which helped her reach an even wider stage in fashion. Kristen's modeling career truly flourished between 1985 and 1998. During that time, she worked with nearly every top designer and major fashion house, including names like Versace, Giorgio Armani, Valentino, Christian Dior, Dolce & Gabbana, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Lanvin, and Moschino. She became a favorite for designers who wanted more than just a pretty face. She brought personality, edge, and a unique presence to every shoot and runway. Early on, she formed strong creative bonds with influential figures in fashion. She met the legendary photographer Peter Lindbergh, who photographed her often, and Karl Lagerfeld, the head designer at Chanel, who guided and mentored her. One of her first major campaigns was for Chanel's Spring/Summer 1985 Haute Couture collection. That same year, she worked with Lindbergh on a campaign for Jill Sander and starred in an advertisement for Byblos. The following year, she appeared in the book A Day in the Life of America and modeled for brands like Gerard Durrell and Alberta Ferretti. Throughout her career, Kristen collaborated with many of the world's greatest fashion photographers, including Albert Watson, Helmut Newton, Richard Avedon, Stephen Meisel, Ellen von Unworth, Arthur Elgort, Paolo Roverse, Patrick de Marchelier, Jean-Baptiste Mondino, David Sims, Max Vaudoucourt, and Wergen Teller. Each photographer praised her ability to transform in front of the camera, and Teller even called her the best model he had ever worked with. Kristen's success came not from simply wearing clothes, but from turning herself into a living work of art, making every image unforgettable. In 1991, Kristen McMenamy became the face of Claude Montana's Spring and Summer collection, showing her striking presence in the campaign. That same year, she appeared alongside model Claudia Mason for Fendi's fall and winter advertisements. At a time when supermodels often followed a traditional standard of beauty, Kristen stood out for being eccentric and bold. She carved her own path among the classic beauties of the era, proving that unconventional looks could also dominate the fashion world. Her distinct style and fearless attitude earned her covers on prestigious magazines, including Vogue, and appearances in other leading publications. Over the years, she has graced the pages of Harper's Bazaar, Vanity Fair, People, Interview, Elle, V, Dazed and Confused, Love, ID, The Face, BW, Women's Wear Daily, and Newsweek, making her one of the most unforgettable and daring models of her generation. In the early 1990s, she became romantically involved with Hubert Bukobza, the owner of the famous Paris nightclub Les Bains Douche. Their relationship brought a daughter into her life in 1994, Lily McMenamy, who would later follow in her mother's modeling footsteps. After her relationship with Hubert ended, Kristen met English fashion photographer Miles Aldridge on a photo shoot for W magazine. They fell in love and married in 1997. Their wedding was a glamorous affair, with Kristen's dress designed by Karl Lagerfeld, who also gave her away, and a stunning headdress by Philip Tracy. Together, Kristen and Miles had 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons, building a family while balancing the world of fashion. After 16 years of marriage, Kristen filed for divorce in April 2013, marking another turning point in her life. Later that year, she began a relationship with art dealer Ivor Braca. Their love grew steadily, and in June 2016, Kristen and Ivor tied the knot, embracing a new chapter of life and partnership. So, what do you think about Kristen's life? Do you think she would have come this far if she had listened to people's negative thoughts about her? Let's hear from you in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.